Hello. I always find it easier to remember things if I understand why they're true. So today we're going to take a look at why the domain of inverse functions gets restricted. And hopefully that will help you remember to apply that when you're doing your problems and coming up with your solutions. Let's go. Okay, so we're looking at inverse functions, right? Inverse sine, the angle whose sine equals x. So let's start by looking at our function sine of theta. Okay, so there's two cycles of our standard function sine theta. And so we know that an inverse function switches the x and the y. And so a quick way to get a visual on that is to actually take your x and y axis and just rotate them by 90 degrees, and that will switch the x and y axis. And so you can see here that if this is our new function where we have switched the x and the y axis, we massively fail the vertical line test. So the reason we restrict the domain of what can go into an inverse function is so that we don't fail the vertical line test. So when we take a look at our sine, we can go all the way to our maximum without repeating any points. Now, as soon as we turn the corner, we are starting to repeat points, so we fail our vertical line test. So we'll cut that off at the maximum. Then similarly, if we go backward, we can go all the way to our minimum before we start to repeat any points. So we'll cut that one off there. And now if we rotate back to our original equation, we see that the restriction on our inverse sine in order to make it pass the vertical line test, well, our minimum is found at negative pi over 2, and our maximum is found at pi over 2. So our restriction when we are looking for things to plug into our inverse sine is that we're only looking in the range of negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, because otherwise we fail the vertical line test when it becomes an inverse. Now, let's take a look at the same concept with cosine. So there's one repetition of our standard cosine graph. And so I can see if I were to switch my x and y axis by rotating, I'm good from my start through 0 to my minimum, and now I start repeating points. So right there is where I want to limit my cosine inverse. And when I bring that back around, so I know that my initial point, my maximum, that starts at 0. And I know I hit my minimum halfway through my cycle, so that's pi or 180. And so the restriction on my inverse cosine is I'm only looking at values between 0 and pi, because other than that, I'm going to fail the vertical line test. And finally, let's take a look at tangent. So there's two iterations of my tangent graph. Well, I can see that my first iteration, I will not fail the vertical line test if I switch my x and y axis, but if I include any other iterations, I will fail my vertical line test. So I need to restrict my tangent to a single iteration. And I remember that my tangent graph has asymptotes at negative pi over 2 and pi over 2, so its restriction is the same as the sine graph. And there you have it. Those are the restrictions on the domains of what can go into your inverse functions. And of course, the domain in the function becomes the range in the inverse. So these are restrictions on the range, the possible output of answers from your inverse functions. Okay, take that, have a think on it. Check out some of the other videos in my trigonometry playlist and my pre-calculus playlist. Consider subscribing to my channel so you know when I put out a new video. And as always, keep on mathing.